Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. As we prepare for the upcoming conclave of cardinals where they will pick the 267th Pope, I have been putting together notes and thoughts and reflections because folks out there need to know the number one thing, the number one tell or determinant for this conclave is something that has been relevant to the church for the last 55 or 60 years and should definitively or semi-definitively answer a big question. I'm going to be talking about what that question is in today's show. I think you're really going to find it useful. I'm going to also read out for you, I think, the best place you can go if you're interested in the prospective cardinals who are candidates for being the 267th Pope. There's a great site that my publisher, Sophia Institute Press, collaborates on. It's really, really tremendous, and I'm going to be reading some of the information from that site as well today. But the most important aspect of today's episode is an answer to the question, what exactly will we need to bear in mind first most heading into this conclave, and what will that determinant tell us about the men who are leading the church themselves? And of course, it'll also, if we can read the tea leaves correctly, tell us yay or nay, will we actually get a good pope, a really good pope for the first time after the council 1965. It's going to be a great show. First, I would encourage all of you guys to go to www.realestateforlife.org. If you live in a blue state, you need to be encouraged to get out of your blue state and get to a red state today, same as I did. I went from the bluest of the blue to the reddest of the red. Use realestateforlife.org, and I suggest the blood red swath of states here in the American Southeast. That's what I did. So I'm speaking from the heart and the mind. I live this, realestateforlife.org. Secondly, if you want to support this show, the number one thing you can do is subscribe as a YouTube subscriber. Number two thing you can do is support financially, even $10 a month on locals, because I'm giving you a side of Catholicism and patriarchy and masculinity from a Catholic perspective, how to retake the church in the world that no one else on YouTube is. We need some support. Locals is how to do it. You can also make a donation at timothyjgordon.com. You can make a real rolling donation, even monthly. But we are trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. It's been a long time coming. Please help us make it there sometime soon. So today's show involves the number one tell, the number one determinant at this conclave, and what we ought to be looking for as concerned Catholics. Even the citizens of the world are interested. For instance, CNN is paying me a visit at my home on Monday. They're going to be filming. There's a great religious reawakening where America is turning to Catholicism. I said this needed to happen if America is to survive in my first book, Catholic Republic, Why America Will Perish Without Rome. Folks, it's slowly happening. This Easter, we had record diocesan numbers of entries into the faith. Now, that's a bit of a white pill, but don't go too far with that. There's a lot more that needs to happen before we've made it out of the woods. That's that. The point is, even interested parties like CNN, who just want to know who's going to be the next leader of the church, are coming, and there's like, hey, can we film you? This footage will either go on Anderson Cooper's show. They're going to ask me what is important to Roman Catholics. And my answer is partly constitutive of the show today. What do Catholics actually care about? The ones that are serious, not the ones in the 80s and the 90s that were like old me, which was ironically young me, raised in the church in the 80s and 90s in a half-hearted way, in a perfunctory way. Half of my heart fully was not even into what I was learning. I was in Catholic school, but I didn't believe any of it. None of my friends did. All my friends at St. Francis St. Mark's, Jesuit of Dallas, pretty much all of them fell away from the faith. And that's very typical of the 80s or 90s, or the decade before I was born, the 70s experience. In short, the post-conciliar experience, the experience of what happened to the church after the Second Vatican Council. It claimed it was going to bring lots of new people in, and all it did was drove a bunch of people away. There were enough people in before. So, CNN's going to come visit me. You might be able to see that footage on Anderson Cooper's show. My whole point in bringing it up is just to demonstrate exactly what can be told at this point in church history, in salvation history. And what can be told is something about the personnel themselves. I want to play for you. Here's what it is. It's something we've been needing to know since the close of Vatican II. Drum roll, please. What I think that thing is that we need to know, that desideratum. Are these cardinals, a couple generations of them, 3, over the last 55 or 60 years since, I don't care whether you count it from the close of the council in 65 or the rolling out of the council's new mass in 69, 70, I don't care, 55 or 60 years. Are these cardinals of the past 6 decades evil or clueless? There's no other real solution, because what the effects of the Second Vatican Council did, irrespective of the fact that it doesn't contain, in my view, any heresies or anything like that. What it did was drive people away from the church, make the people who stayed in the church not believe in the sacrament of the Eucharist, which made, because all the other 6 sacraments subserve it, it made them disbelieve in all the other 6 sacraments as well. It also forced a kind of lazy, drifters class of unbelieving men into the priesthood. Let's leave it at that. And both the clergy and the lay alike has been living in a kind of Jimmy Carter era malaise since the close of the council, maybe the start of the council, definitely the close of the council or 70. So the men who run the church, forget the Pope for a minute. He's on top of the pyramid. But the men who run the church, they are literally, I'm borrowing language from Julius Caesar, from the tragedy of Caesar by Shakespeare. They're fat and happy. Even the conservatives. I remember even 10 years ago, one of my conservative friends telling me he thought Cardinal Schönborn, who's one of the minor papabile going into this cardinal, was a conservative. Oh, he helped write the Catechism of the Catholic Church in the early 90s. He helped Ratzinger. And Ratzinger was hailed as this big arch conservative. Neither of those guys are, strictly speaking, conservatives. Schönborn's a liberal. Ratzinger's kind of center, sometimes center left, sometimes center right. But they were all Rahnerites, which is liberal theologians. So given that the church has been horrible and the cardinals, the leaders of the church, have remained through the church's worst period ever, the last 60 years, fat and happy, are they just clueless or are they outright evil? Cluelessness has been their closest approach to a defense for the ship that they've just let fall into disrepair. It's supposed to be a tight ship with hospital corner beds, newly scrubbed planks on the floor, sparkling countertops, the mast flies high, crisp in the wind, and they've let it degenerate into a ruin that barely stays afloat, the bark of Peter. And meanwhile, the crew of the ship is off engaging in degeneracy, oftentimes with each other, Homo sapien degeneracy. And, let's say that, I don't know how to extend this analogy anymore. The laity are just fatherless. That's why I address you guys parish orphans. Parish orphans. We have been parish orphans since before I was born. I was born a parish orphan. We do not have priests, bishops, cardinals that do their job, by and large. I'm talking 99% of them. Something like 75, 80% of them through some periods of this time are living in habitual grave, unnatural sin. But we won't talk about that today. So how will this conclave, this is the most important thing, how will this conclave answer this question? Are the cardinals of 55 or even 60 years ago, who aren't even alive today, are they evil or clueless? Cluelessness being the closest approach to a defense. Consider what Cardinal Dolan, Timothy Dolan of New York, said 2 days ago. I want to play this clip for you where he's intoning, he's a center leftist in the church. Again, 10 years ago, people were calling him a kind of center right guy. It's just idiotic. That's just not true. People didn't, at that point 10 years ago, understand how far left the church was on everything. And then, you know, a lot's happened in the last decade. Taylor Marshall and I did this show, and that was kind of a red pilling for a lot of people. Wow, everything's way worse than we thought. Main thing people took from TNT. Cardinal Dolan is a center-left, kind of typical fat and happy guy, goes along with the LMNOP-Q movement. Remember, he said he had no right to judge the Homo sapiens who marched with him in the St. Patrick's Day parade. Yeah, you do. This is like the most grave sin, worse than murder, according to many of the doctors of the church. St. Peter Damian, it's far worse than murder. I don't want to judge them. So this is Cardinal Dolan, and he is sounding rather rightward leaning. Can we play that clip, please?
Yes, let me see.
Okay.
What do you want to see in terms of the next pope?
Well, you know, when you get to be 75 like I am, you kind of got in your memory bank past popes, and you kind of are always dreaming of a blend of them. I'd love to see somebody with the vigor and the conviction and the fortitude of John Paul. I'd love to see somebody with the intellectual wattage of a Pope Benedict. I'd love to see somebody with the heart of a Pope Francis. How we can blend them all. We're not in some laboratory doing genetic mutations here, but that's probably what we would look for. Somebody with the same style of Francis, that warmth, that heart, that smile, that goodness, that embrace. And maybe within a little bit of a blend with John Paul and Benedict, when it would come to more, what would I say, more clarity in teaching, more refinement of the church's tradition, more digging in the treasures of the past to remind us of what Jesus expects of us now. Probably a blend of the great popes that we've recently had. That's what we'd be looking for.
Okay, first thing, I just want to get this out of the way. None of these were great popes. My favorite pope in the post-conciliar era, personally, is Pope Benedict. We had high hopes those first years. It was while I was coming back into the church, 05, 06, 07. And, you know, I had an ongoing reversion. I've told this story, which would continue for the next 5 years after 07. But I was coming back into the church and went to Rome to study under Benedict. We had high hopes in those days, thought he was a real conservative. Then we learned that he'd been a Raunerite as a young man. Then we learned that he never really ditched his Raunerism, theological liberalism from the time of the council. And that kind of prompted everyone to readdress Pope John Paul II. And whoa, he's even further to the left in terms of the kind of Rauner scale, communio, concilio, the kind of sliding scale of Vatican II liberalism. He was even further left than Benedict XVI. And then, of course, we had Francis, who's the furthest left pope in the history of the church, the worst pope, if he was pope at all, in the history of the church, the modern church anyway. No doubt about it. We still have to deal with this catastrophe of Amoris Laetitia, where it's still not quite clear, even though the language should make it clear. You can give communion to the civilly divorced and remarried. That means that mortal sin does not bar one from the Eucharist. That means impossibility. Paradox. So none of these are great popes at all.
Michael Haynes, there's a tweet on right now. He has he just said that new Cardinal Mueller on the conclave for Pope Francis' successor. He says, quote, "I am praying that the Holy Spirit will illuminate the cardinals, because a heretic pope who changes every day depending on what the mass media is saying would be catastrophic."
Right. Now, what could Cardinal Mueller be saying? And again, he's not some arch conservative. He's kind of like Benedict, center, sometimes center right, sometimes center left. And who's he referring to? A heretic pope that changes day to day based on his popularity, let's say he enters really popular. I don't know who I'm thinking of here. In a 12-year pontificate, enters popular with the media. People don't really realize what a Trojan horse he is. I've already addressed JP2 and Benedict, so might as well do Francis. And then slowly people get wise to the fact that even secularists outside the church are like, whoa, this guy's really not cognizably Catholic. He says you can't judge the worst sins. He says, the traditions of the church are bad and sinful, and that the traditional people in the church aren't real Catholics. He says mortal sin doesn't bar you from going to communion. He says what he said in Fiducia Supplicans. So this is Mueller complaining about these guys. So first off, back to Cardinal Dolan, American cardinal who used to be very popular, but then everyone got kind of red-pilled. He's saying, I want a blend of these last three popes, Francis, Benedict XVI, and John Paul II. And he's talking about them like they've been good. None of the popes since the council have been good. You had John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul I, whose pontificate only lasted 33 days, ended with a potential murder, never got to the bottom of that. John Paul II lasted, I think, third longest pontificate in history, was widely celebrated by the right and the left during his pontificate. Benedict XVI, who extended his program of, I don't know, centrism, theologically speaking, enthusiasm for Vatican II with a little bit more traditionalism. And then you get him forced out of the pontificate. We never get to the bottom of that either, same as we never got to the bottom of who murdered John Paul I. And then we wind up with Francis, the most subversive pope in certainly modern memory, probably ever. And you have Dolan saying, okay, well, I want to blend the last three guys, but I want you to see past the fact that this is fat, happy, kind of aristocratic Cardinal Dolan. He doesn't know much theology. He doesn't know much philosophy. He doesn't care about ecclesiology. He has no real interest in going back in a true sense to return, RETVRN, to the pre-conciliar era. That's what a true return, RETVRN, would be. That's what I want. I don't mean you have to undo Vatican II or say it didn't stand for anything. You just say, look, the only way to do a hermeneutic of continuity is to actually reassess the demands of the document on the Mass from Vatican II, Sacrosanctum Concilium, and just say, this means maybe we change one thing at the Mass. It needs to be Tridentine. It needs to be in Latin. It needs the priest needs to be facing ad orientem posture. We need to have no altar girls. We need to follow the missal, but we'll change one thing which takes into consideration what Sacrosanctum Concilium said. By the way, it never said to undo any of that stuff I just listed. So that's what we want, is a true return, RETVRN. I'm kind of bracketing the fact that Dolan is this clueless aristocratic guy that just eats well every night. You can tell most of the cardinals are fat. They eat well every night. They eat too well on everyone else's dime. And they are, most of them, stumbling blocks. You know what our Lord says about stumbling blocks in Scripture. But what he's saying should be channeled and interpolated some. I want to add to it a little bit. What he's saying seems to stand for the proposition that, okay, well, we could take, to be positive about Pope Francis 2.5 days after he died, when he said this yesterday, we'll take his heart, whatever that means, right? Because he was seen as having a big heart in the first 2 or 3 years of the pontificate. And then we found out that there's wiretapping happening in the Vatican, that he had passed out with rage for 10 minutes in Domus Santa Marta, where he said, I will have the red hats of the dubia cardinals, who just respectfully asked, what does Amoris Laetitia mean? What could it mean? He passed out. He had these fits of rage. He was wiretapping the other cardinals. He is referring to people in really, really nasty language. Remember some of the things he called people? He said the conservative Catholics were shit eaters. It's literally, he said they have a fascination for eating shit. Remember that? Coprophagia. And he also said they have a profinity, Catholics like me, for coprophilia, making love to shit. Now, this is just the literal translation. This is the term he used. I mean, he also said there's too much fraccione. That's cool. So he's using harsh language once every 30 times for leftism and leftist causes. But 29 out of 30 times, he's calling faithful sons of the church, not perfect by any stretch. People that love tradition are annoying in their own way. I check the box too for being annoying. I get it. But he's calling us shit eaters. So it came out year 5, 6, 7, 8. He's really a rage-filled guy. But what Cardinal Dolan is doing is just saying, I got to find, this guy just died. I got to find something positive about the guy that just died, number 266, something to say about him so that we can overlook his terrible, terrible, terrible teaching. Just at worst, the most clueless teaching ever. More than that, it's probably evil. But even center-left Cardinal Dolan is saying, okay, I'll just play on this mischaracterization of Pope Francis from the first 2-3 years of his pontificate when he was very popular. His popularity dropped because people found out he was really a kind of a mean-hearted guy. And I'm saying kind of just to soften it because it's still only 3-day-old news that he died. He was really, really harsh, and people are afraid of him. There's a climate of fear, even with the leftist cardinals in the Vatican. This story broke in 2020 during COVID. And people were like, why are you an accomplice to the 2020 and 2019 agenda? Remember that? Which is really a setup for Agenda 2030. And then there's that too. He was an accomplice for Agenda 2030 and the actionable goals there. So even the center left and even some of the leftist cardinals were saying, wow, this guy's mean. He really brought a lot of Juan Perón. He was an admirer of Juan Perón from Buenos Aires in his boyhood. He really brought a lot of this to his style of leadership. He's not freewheeling at all. But Dolan knows that he's talking to whoever he's talking to on mainstream news. They don't know jack squat. All they know is this initial blush, first conception that the public had of Pope Francis, which lasted. It lasts in the minds of the 95%. They don't ever learn another damn thing. But for the people that were just moderately observant, who are sober for the last 8 years of this pontificate, were like, whoa. But still, Dolan's doing something, and I want to point out what it is. He's saying we should not take any doctrinal teaching from Francis. In fact, it's kind of insinuated by what he said. He left a mess that's going to have to be cleaned up. But then I want to take the vigor of John Paul II, and he can kind of make an appeal to center-right people who think like communism is a big problem in the world. Because JP2 was seen as one of the ardent defenders against communism, one of the ones even, according to some ways the story is told, who defeated it. It's a very boomer take. Right on. And this is why boomers think JP2 is a religious conservative. Nothing of the sort. He's the feminist pope. He's the guy that kissed the Quran. He's the guy that carried on the tradition of Vatican II as a sort of second Pentecost. He was a Rahnerite following the theology of Karl Rahner really till the day he died. There's a lot of other stuff. I don't want to go all the way into it. But
thanks for doing that, because some people in chat were asking why you thought JP2 was a bad pope.
He's the feminist pope. He's the pope who kissed the Quran at Assisi in 1987. He's the pope that really came down more harshly on. I'm not a huge fan of Lefebvre, but he came down really harshly on Lefebvre, a guy that's way right of center, but in most ways, aside from ecclesiologically, a very faithful son of the church. Far harder on him than on all the McCarricks, on all the Sankt Gallen mafia types who were actually taking advantage of him late in his pontificate. Him, John Paul II. He punished the crap out of Lefebvre, and he just did nothing but promote all of the worst cardinals. If you look at the worst cardinals who were abusing him, really in his late pontificate and manipulating him, the Sankt Gallen types from Malachi Martin's book, Windswept House, they were all guys he had promoted foolishly. And same thing with the guys that were probably eventually forced out Benedict XVI, had all been promoted by John Paul II, and some by Benedict XVI. And then, of course, we come to the enigma, the Teutonic enigma of Benedict XVI. And again, what Dolan's saying that's important is that he was known, same as Francis was known as being really nice, he wasn't. JP2 is known as having a lot of heart and brave, he really wasn't. JP2 was a famous ditherer. Benedict was known to idiot normies as really conservative. He wasn't. But what Dolan's doing is he's making an appeal based on the caricatures to idiot normies of the three last popes. And he's saying, we need... The one thing that's true about any of these three guys is Benedict did have some appreciation for a return, R-E-T-V-R-N, to tradition. That's the one true thing. The rest of it's a caricature of him as a theological conservative. He wasn't. A caricature of John Paul II. He's seen as a really lion-hearted, right of center guy. He wasn't. And Francis is seen as really kind. But the way he's making this modified appeal to idiot normies, from maybe even Dolan's kind of a normie and doesn't really realize what he's saying or recognize it as wrong, is very telling. He's saying we need nothing from Francis. We do need doctrinal clarity, and we need vigor as we approach doctrinal clarity. That sounds pretty good. Did you get what I'm saying, Steph? Do you get what I'm trying to say? You have to correct for inflation. You have to correct for his, with all due respect, the kind of fat-headed, contented complacency that runs with the land when we're talking to a cardinal like Dolan. Mm-hmm. And once we make that correction for inflation, all he's saying is some really good stuff. And considering that he's a center-left kind of dude, we need vigor in returning more to traditionalism. We need a kind of lion-hearted defense of things right of center, and we need really nothing on paper from Francis. The most we need is good heart, which doesn't pertain to Francis in most people's view anymore, but did in the first 2 years of the pontificate. That sounds pretty good. If this is what all the guys in the College of Cardinals of a voting age, which Dolan still is because he's younger than 80, if they're all thinking this way, most of them are left, center-left, contrary to some of the nonsense that's been going around that they're mostly right, center-right. That is absolute nonsense. If you count Cardinal Turkson as a moderate, if you count Cardinal Mueller as a conservative, if you count Cardinal Tagle as a sort of moderate leftist, who's another one? If you count Cardinal Secretary of State, what's his name? The Cardinal Secretary of State, I'm forgetting his name right now, is a moderate. They're all like 1.5 ticks to the left of where they're being...
You're not talking about Fernandez, like Chucho?
No, he's cardinal. He's the doctrinal chief. Yeah, according to this metric, maybe he's a center leftist, Tucho Fernandez. I'm saying everyone is 1.5 clicks to the left of where they're at. And if you titrate, or if you recalibrate everyone 1.5 clicks to the right of where they're actually at, which is what they did, then yeah, you could say, oh, most of the cardinals who are of voting age are actually center right. That's nonsense. Who is it that did that?
ENB said Parolin. Is it Parolin?
Yeah, okay. Parolin. Thanks.
In chat. Interestingly enough, on First Things on Twitter, saying something similar to what your show is today. Their headline for an article is Pope Francis's personality tended toward the temperamental and autocratic. He resisted even loyal criticism. He had a pattern of ambiguity and loose words that sowed confusion and conflict.
I'm glad First Things is saying the right thing here. He had a pattern of weaponized ambiguity, to quote Monsignor Charles Pope. We use this term probably 1,000 times per show back on the TNT days, and even the first kind of 2 years of me doing this channel independently. You guys were sick of hearing me saying it if you've stuck with me since 2019. Weaponized ambiguity, but with a pattern of autocratic rage for even loyalists who are like, Your Holiness, this is crazy. We can't give communion to unrepentant adulterers. And he's like, get out of town. And just firing people, burning it down. Remember what he did to the John Paul II Institute on the Family? He burned it down, filled it with questionable Homo sapiens and pedos and groomers. He, was supposed to be the kind of pro-life, anti-contraception establishment that JP2 had established, and he put it all with pro-abortion, pro-contraception mavins, and yelled at anybody or fired them if they even respectfully demurred. Okay, so yes, I'm happy to see First Things is being honest about that. Now the question is, what do we do about it? Well, what we should be looking for is to solve the Sphinx's riddle, at least since Vatican II. Are all of these physically fat, they eat well every night, fancy Italian food, fancy French cuisine, they're just eating out, dining out on everyone else's dime. Every night they eat well. They're not lean fishermen like half the original apostles. They're not risking themselves. They're not even risking their good name with the citizens of the world over at MSNBC and CNN. I did another tweet about Cardinal Dolan, just to give you a picture of who this guy was, when he said, who am I to judge? I would never judge. I'm happy to march in the St. Patty's Day parade in New York when they let the big LG, LMNOPQ contingent in. What did he say?
I have that on the screen right now. The headline was Cardinal to lead St. Pat's parade with first gay group. And there's a picture of him right there. And then the article goes on to say that Dolan was quick to issue a statement of support for the parade organizers accepting their decision.
Yeah.
I guess about.
And then someone did a really nice little follow-up tweet there in the comments where they expressed something even more extreme he'd said about the Homo sapien agenda. He's like all of these guys for the last 6 decades. They're not faithful sons of the church, and they're being elevated to the episcopate and to being archbishops and often cardinals for being, by all appreciable measures, unfaithful, bad sons of the church.
Are you referring to the screenshot
Yes.
that somebody? Okay, so So it says Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York praised University of Missouri football star Michael Sam for coming out, saying he would not judge the athlete for his sexual orientation. Quote, good for him, Dolan said in an interview with NBC's Meet the Press airing Sunday. That's
Conservative Cardinal Dolan. Idiots were calling this cardinal conservative, like as recently as 2015, 2016. Look, Taylor Marshall and I should do a follow-up show on this conclave because that his channel, I'll give him the credit because it's his channel, and it was very important for a lot of people in 20. I'm not saying now. I'm saying in 2018, 2019, when he had the good sense to get with a guy with a very different temperament, myself, and to put together those shows. We really red-pilled a lot of people, and the glory is God's. But people were calling Dolan or Bishop Barron, who says, who's a quasi-universalist, who says we have a reasonable hope and there is no one in hell, and repeats that and sticks to it. And he said a bunch of other bad things. He said Jesus is the privileged path to heaven, not the only path to heaven. They were calling guys like this, center leftists, like Cardinal Dolan or Bishop Barron, conservative, American conservatives, as late as 2016, 2017 even. And then TNT came on the show and really shook a lot of this up. So that was important. And the point is, for the last 6 decades, we've been looking at these kind of cardinals that are being called, conservative when they're center left, and they're being called moderate when they're radical subversive leftists. We're scratching our heads and we're sitting here wondering, why is the church operating the way it is? Why are you elevated only for being a bad guy who doesn't believe the gospel? That's the only appreciable metric. Are these guys just sort of, because I've met enough bishops to know they're usually just sort of empty-headed fools. Either effeminate or sometimes not. The effeminate ones who like the handsome guys just will get an even more vapid man who they find pretty to look at, because this is who runs the church, the lavender agenda. They'll get them in place. The main goal is they have to be empty-headed. You will lead the way we tell you to lead. And then it's a secondary goal of the Lavender Mafia to have pretty boys in there that they like to look at. That's just the way the church has been since the council. Sorry. Doesn't mean it ain't the church. It's just in a really, really bad way. So are they clueless or are they evil? We will know at this conclave. We're going to know because Francis was the truth outing itself. With Francis, all bets were off. With Pope Francis, the mask came off of the Vatican II agenda. Francis said we did not go far enough with the spirit of Vatican II. Francis said the old church needs to be rebuilt anew. Cardinal McCarrick, Uncle Ted Molester McCarrick, who was the guy that got Francis in position, more than even the St. Gallen Mafia. According to a speech he gave at Villanova University 6 months after Francis came in late 2013, he said, it was me and a mysterious Italian gentleman. And we talked to each other and we said, there's this unknown Bergoglio who can remake the face of the church if we gave him 5 years. In 4 or 5 years, he can remake the church into something wholly new, just what we wanted it to be. And of course, to understand what he's really talking about, you have to understand the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita. I might do a show on that in the coming days. Again, I love to do a kind of revisitation show with Taylor on this, because this is our time in a way. But the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita is the Masons of the world who said they wanted to infiltrate the church. It's an intercepted document by either Pius IX or Gregory XVI. We're not exactly sure who it was, but by the middle 1800s, we had the document and multiple popes promulgated it. Said this is an intercepted document and we look for interlopers in the church who are going to take the next 100 years, as the document says, and get someone into the pontificate that will serve the interests of the cardinalate. The cardinalate will actually be Masons. This was demonstrated by Pio Ponto and by actually the pontificate of John Paul I. The cardinalate was largely Masons. The powerful contingent was. The Pope doesn't need to be a Mason, but he needs to serve the agenda of the powerful Mason cardinals. That's the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, intercepted document at the beginning of the 1800s, widely promulgated by 3 or 4 popes in the late 1800s, saying this is what's coming in the 1900s. By the way, yes, the Second Vatican Council was organized by guys in complicitude with this agenda. So we're going to find now that we have center leftists like Dolan saying things that are rightward leaning. Are they just bluffing? Are they going to give us another Francis? Or, which would mean a bluff, him having said something like this yesterday and then giving us a Francis would mean, okay, they're just buying themselves plausible deniability or time or something. I can't figure why he would do it, but it would be a bluff de facto. And that would mean, they're just evil. They want more of Francis. Or have they been, I'm not saying it's not evil, but have they been something more like clueless the last 3 generations of cardinals since the council? And they actually respond to new information when, say, the Pope that the Alta Vendita envisioned drops his mask, which is what Francis did. You know, the Lavender Mafia who gave us Francis, they were openly, we found out, dropping their pants. But the Pope that they gave us dropped the mask. That's what the Francis pontificate was. That's what the Francis pontificate was. And so now we will get, if guys like Dolan or, Mueller's definitely a little to the right of Dolan because he did come out as more a ballsy critic of Francis, but he's not much further to the right. Or guys like, Bishop Barron, who's not a cardinal, so he won't have a vote. But if those kind of, fat, contented, happy, benefiting by the church's ignorance, sort of salutary neglect from their perspective. Cardinals, if they give us another Francis, then we will be able to authoritatively say it's post-mask drop now. Took 60 years for Vatican II, spirit of Vatican II, to really show itself. And now that it's shown itself to everyone, even the idiot normies that believe mainstream agenda, mainstream narratives, if they go with another Francis, That means 2/3 of these cats are evil. With Francis, he did finish second in the voting at the 2005 conclave. Did you know that? I mean, I've done lots of shows on it, but when Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, the presumptive, he was the CDF under JP2 for 25 years. He was the presumptive next pontiff. The Lavender Mafia types who had hated JP2, I'm not sure why he did much of their bidding, but when they met at St. Gallen, Switzerland every year, they said the main goal of this is to avoid a presumptive Ratzinger pontificate. And they bragged about it since then. Well, they didn't quite know. Somehow Bergoglio finished second, even though he was an unknown. But allegedly between the third, this is the way the story goes, at the 2005 conclave, which gave us eventual Pope Benedict XVI, Benedict was unable to, in the first 3 scrutinies, which is what they call votes at conclaves, they were unable to get to the necessary majority. And Benedict was coming out on top, but he kept coming in closer than anyone expected to this unknown from Buenos Aires. Bergoglio. Who is this guy? They broke for lunch after the 3rd scrutiny, and at the end of lunch, Ratzinger at the time was seen walking hand in hand with none other than Cardinal Martini, the leader at the time of the St. Gallen Mafia. They were considered enemies. Right after lunch, they go and they hold the 4th scrutiny, and all of the furthest left voting in the College of Cardinals, in that Lavender Mafia controlled by Cardinal Carlo Martini, went suddenly from Bergoglio, transferred to Ratzinger, who would become Benedict XVI. And they seem to have, many have speculated, have worked out some deal. Could it be, hey, you have 8 years in the chair, and then you give it up to us, and we're going to put in Cardinal Bergoglio as Pope Francis, who was finishing second. That seems to be what happened. I can't say I'm certain. That seems to be what happened, which is why he mysteriously left Benedict. Okay, so we're getting into some of the histories. I probably should revisit a lot of this in a show, or 2 or 3. But this is all what's just beneath the surface, hovering just behind the scenes, informing my analysis. And of course, there's all kinds of stories told by those like Malachi Martin in fact fiction novels about the events right after the council in the 70s. And similar stories. The Lavender Mafia, the St. Gallen Mafia, and their predecessors, they always get their guy in. So now that that's been made clear to even the reasonably observant normies, you start hearing different rhetoric by Cardinal Dolan, which is why I read that to you. And if they go back on it and give us another Francis or one of his clones, like Cardinal Tagle, just Asian Francis, or Cardinal Turkson, African Francis, it's a little more conservative than Francis, but a Francis man, then we'll know it was all bluster. They're trying to buy, by saying rightward-leaning things, I don't know, whatever you would try to buy with such a statement, time, plausible deniability, credibility. I don't know why you would say them and then do the other thing. But if now let's say they go with a Cardinal Sarah, holy cow, this bespeaks some honesty and some plausible deniability. They literally were just idiotic, even though they have a front and center view because they're cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church. And I figured this out, 10 years ago, or maybe longer. They were just sort of foolish and change blind. And that's what it'll say if they end up giving us a Sarah. Because you could say the good heart that Francis was said to have, Cardinal Sarah truly has. This is a spiritual master. This is a truly holy man who used to be in charge of the Congregation of Divine Worship. Did you guys remember that? You remember that, Steph? Francis demoted him. He was prefect. Why did he get demoted? He's too friendly to traditionalism, but he's got a prayerful heart. He says, poverty is good for people. Destitution's bad. You shouldn't be eating dirt, but poverty's good. And he's thin. That's the main thing I look at. Are these guys fat? You think I was joking when I did that show last week? And I was like, look, if someone's fat without some sort of metabolic glandular issue, which basically no one has, that tells me all I need to know about that person. They can't lead. They can't say no. They're probably addicted to other things. They have no resolve. They're not willing to take an unpopular choice. Fat leaders are a contradiction in terms. The Cardinals are characteristically fat. Give me a fit-looking guy like Cardinal Sarah. You guys choose where you spend your time on the Catholic internet. But don't give me a fat face. That just means this is someone that is open and notorious about the fact that they're like, I give in to my fleshy desires. It's a failure of temperance. Temperance is taste and touch being moderated. If you can't moderate taste, you usually can't moderate touch because it's a higher drive. So that would vindicate them some. At least it would bespeak their innocence as to the higher charge of, are they evil? Are they wicked? Are they part of the lavender agenda? In more onerous a way than just being tricked by it and thereby compliant. Are they actually willingly, openly compliant with it? Okay, now, so the second half of this is, I want to direct you to Sophia Institute Press collaborates on this site called, given the papabile, called the College of Cardinals Report, and it is excellent. There are T-charts of the most papabile, 30 guys. It's a more inclusive org chart of personnel in terms of who's considered papabile, popable cardinals. You'll see them with 6, 7, sometimes 8, 9 members on Twitter or on the internet. This is like the most papabile 30 or 25 guys, and it's just issue by issue what is known about their position there. So take someone like I think it's Archbishop Pizzaballa.
If you'd like to look on your laptop, I have it already up for you, and you can just tell me where you want to go.
Yeah, sure. Let's have a look here. Let's have a look, because people are. I mean, bear in mind this was a kind of more philosophical show. I wanted to be like, the number one tell is, what are the center leftists actually going to do? That's going to tell us about stuff from long before our day.
It should be a tab up on your browser, and again, this is collegeofcardinalsreport.com.
Okay, collegeofcardinalsreport.com. Thank you very much for always doing excellent work. Not just publishing my books, Sophia Institute Press, but they just do great work. It's I'll always have something positive to say about Sophia Institute Press. Now, the Cardinalium Collegii Ricenso. It's a handsome site too. It looks good. They literally go through how many issues? Hold on, let me expand this way. 5 issues, and these are not necessarily the most important 5 issues, but they're 5 issues that most of the papabili have records of support or opposition on. So some of them are quite important issues. Ordaining female deacons, I consider that very important. Left open by Francis, it was part of his agenda. He never got around to it. He thought it would be too aggressive. Was supposed to do it in 2019 at the Amazon Synod, never got around to it, left it open, and has left it open with wordplay ever since. Ordaining female deacons, we have a voting record on many of these cats. Blessing same-sex couples, very important issue. Less important issue, but very telling, because it is one of the Sankt Gallen Mafia's agenda items, according to conservative Dubia Cardinal Walter Brandmuller. He said in 2014, this was one of their issues, making priestly celibacy optional. Now, this is not a dogmatic issue, because for several centuries, and even in several rites of the church today, priestly celibacy is not optional. Is optional. So this is not like women priests or deacons, which can never happen. That's dogma. This is reformable. It is considered a discipline. A lot of people don't know that. That's why I call it less important. But it's pretty much only the libtards that want it, and the good guys that don't want it. I don't think it's such a dire important issue, but it's important. That's number 3. We have the records of all these guys on it. Restoring the old Latin Mass. Or sorry, restricting the old Latin Mass. That's okay. I think that's very important. And then maybe important for geopolitical mavens, the Vatican-China secret accords. I think that's of moderate importance, but it's not the most important thing. And then we have a whole other thing: promoting a synodal church. Number 6, focusing on climate change. Are there any X's there? Yeah, there's some X's there. Reassessing humanae vitae. Wow, that's a big one. That means what the Sankt Gallen Mafia Homo sapiens have wanted for 50 years.
What specifically would they be reassessing in that? Would you just tell everybody?
That would be making contraception licit, which they can't do. That's an irreformable dogma. Communion for divorced and remarried. That is the tell issue for were they a Francis man? Were they a yes man for Francis? If you have a check here on this issue, then you are a Francis clone. Lots of checks there. And wow, this is the biggest tell for a subversive radical. Issue number 10, support for the German synodal way. If you have a check there, you are or even a question mark, usually you're a radical. Now, almost none of them. Tucho Fernandez has a left-right symbol. Can you read us exactly what the left-right symbol mean? I take it as a check.
It's ambiguous. And it says underneath, Cardinal Fernandez has criticized the German synodal way for appearing elitist, saying it sometimes seems like one part of the world feels, quote, particularly enlightened and believes it can reform the whole church. However, he has expressed openness to limited pastoral developments.
Right.
So each one of these things, if you look underneath their name, right now we're on Cardinal Fernandez. If you click on like the check mark, it actually gives you more information on where he stands on that issue. Check mark meaning in favor, X obviously against, and the question mark is unknown. And then the arrow here is they don't really have enough information.
The arrow I take as a check. It means usually that they've said at least one thing in favor of this radical agenda item.
Yeah, staying silent on an issue is kind of an answer.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Wait, how do I go back? So there are 10 issues?
Yeah, I have it up here if you want me to read them again at the top of the page.
Yeah, just run through the 10 issues. They're all pretty much leftist.
Okay, so first one, ordaining female deacons, then blessing same-sex couples, then it's priestly celibacy optional, or making priestly celibacy optional, excuse me, then restricting the old Latin Mass, then Vatican-China secret accords, promoting a synodal church, focusing on climate change, reassessing humanae vitae, communion for divorced and remarried, and ending with German synodal way. And this is 41 cardinals.
41.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's tremendous. That's tremendous.
You can click on them. So I know a lot of people are interested in Burke. So let's click on Burke. And then we have more information on Burke. It has his birth date, birthplace, nation, voting status, because that's very important, obviously, knowing who is voting. So here we go. And we have a summary of Cardinal Burke. What's also quite helpful, Tim, I don't know if you saw this, but if you go to the top and it says interactive map, it shows us total number of cardinals, where they're voting, who's voting, who were they appointed by, very interesting cardinal type. And
all the lefties are usually appointed by, used to be appointed by JP2. Now it's, of course, Francis.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. I was just there we have the interactive map. And then we have, so obviously here we are, what's relevant to us. So we have our area here. Oop, come on. And it tells us North America, we have a total number of cardinals, 36. Our voting cardinals, we have 20. So that's 14.8% of all voting cardinals will be represented by North America. And then we have the breakdown. We have who were they created by? So we have 25% of them were created by, I believe that's JP2, and then 9% by Benedict, and 50% by Francis.
Wait, how many by JP2?
It looks like JP2, 25%. Sorry.
more than Benedict.
More than Benedict. Benedict was at 25%.
So for people out there that are kind of new to all this,
they're the same. 9 and
a consistory is where the cardinals, is where the Pope makes new cardinals. That's just him. He gets to do that with full undersigning powers. At a consistory, he announces the new cardinals. At the other C word, at a conclave, that's where the cardinals vote on a new Pope. So it's kind of one hand washing the other. This process of the Pope makes the cardinals. When he dies, those cardinals that he and earlier popes made at a conclave make the new Pope. That's how that works. Consistories make cardinals, conclaves make popes. And I think that now, again, the age of the internet, it's been so good for the mask drop, for lies to die, for truth to out. The age of the internet has been so good. So there was not stuff like this even in 2013. Not nearly as organized, not nearly as clear. How many cardinals are on this thing, Stevie? 41?
There's all, but like right now on the screen we have the map of cardinals for North America. So the total number of cardinals in America is 36, and it says the number of voting cardinals that we represent is 20, which is 14.8% of all voting cardinals represent us. And then down below, it tells us specifically all of our cardinals, and then it tells you if they are voting and if they are not voting.
Wait, so it has these 10 issues as an X or a check for all of the cardinals?
I thought it was papibile, but let me look. Let me look up on here.
Oh,
so cardinals.
Cardinal Pizzaballa is a cardinal. I thought he was just an archbishop.
It looks like they do. Look, on the side, I'll put it up right now. They do have 252 cardinals. Where they stand on most of this stuff, I think. Let me look. Let me go up. I'm sorry, maybe not. Let me go to where I clicked the wrong one. Where they stand. Okay, so it's only 41 cardinals that they have represented here. But then if you click that are papibile, they will tell you, then they'll go down to 22. And it gives you a list of who this site believes is a contender for our next pope.
So who are the 22? Beginning with Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich, he's like a check across the board.
Okay,
is he
so
considered?
You're going to probably have to read the names because I'm going to butcher that to no end. So if you go to where they stand on the laptop, and then in the right-hand corner, papibile, right there, click that.
Where's the right-hand corner?
Right here. Right on it says there's like a little top.
Papabile.
There you go. And then if you just read those for people, because again, this show will go on to podcast too, so they're not going to actually see what's on the screen.
Right. We always have to think of that. So beginning with Cardinal Fridolin Mbongo Basungo, he is, I guess, a moderate from Africa. I don't know too much about this guy. Let me go to Cardinal Anders Arboleus. He's pretty far to the left. He's a check on lots of these. Really, basically, one check means that they're a moderate.
Yeah,
on
check
10
for
issues.
Divorced and communion, communion for divorce remarriage.
Yeah. So he's a Francis man.
Mm-hmm.
Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline. He's lots of checks. Cardinal Angelo Bagnasco. He is mostly X's. Do you have the first 5 up? I only can look at 5 at a time.
I see all of them.
You see all of them?
Yeah.
What's he on the first 5?
Okay. You want to look at the first 5 and I'll look at I'm
looking at the last 5. You look at the first 5.
Okay. So for Bagnasco, he is, he's against female deacons.
Good.
They do not know about same-sex couples, no information. He is against priestly celibacy options and then making priestly celibacy optional. And this is Bagnasco, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's not information about the Old Latin Mass, whether he will restrict it.
So for someone to be a faithful son of the church, you basically want to see 10 X's. 10 X's is what you want to see. Anything less is some sort of unfaithfulness to clear church teaching, because none of these 10 issues are really ambiguous at all. Mm-hmm. Again, priestly celibacy, that's a bit of a toss-up, because we do have some rights where priests don't have to be celibate, but they're minority. And why would you want to change the main right, the 99% right? That represents leftism. So
did you want to go through some more of these? Or?
Cardinal Charles Maung-Bo. He's lots of X's, 3 of 5 X's on the far right. I don't know who he is besides, but
I have X for female deacons, so no on female deacons, non-information on same-sex couples. I have no on same-sex couples, and making priests. He is pro making priestly celibacy optional.
Yeah, so he's 3. He's 4, communion for divorced and remarried. He wants to focus on climate change. He wants to promote a synodal church. So
no,
gross.
no, no, thank you.
Cardinal Stephen Brislin.
Okay.
He's got 3 X's here. He's not a major papabile. He has 3 X's out of 5 on the right side.
We have some check marks on my side. So we have he's in favor of female deacons. It's ambiguous on same-sex couples, and he is in favor of making celibacy optional.
So he's a big lefty.
Yeah.
He's in favor of synodal church, climate change, communion for divorce and remarried. I don't know if we need to do guys like this because he's not very papabile.
Yeah.
But next we come to Cardinal Raymond Leo Burke.
Okay, let's look at work because this is
just X's all the way across.
This is what we want.
Yeah.
So here he is. Here's our guy. And as you can see, it is...
He's just 10 X's, right?
He's a full line of X's. Like, and that's
what he
perfect.
Should be.
I love that. I love that they didn't do it like in the positive. I love that they put this in the negative where it's like, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just what a faithful, what any of the apostles would have voted on any of this stuff is 10 X's. That doesn't make him a conservative, aside from the sense that it makes him conservative, doesn't make him right wing.
And isn't this great too? Like, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no.
Yeah.
All of these like ambiguous. It's like, I don't trust that. I'd rather just see an X or a check mark on all of these things. Just be honest with who you are. You know, just be honest and faithful to your views.
I understand though on certain, like focusing on climate change, this is so gay and fringe to even talk about as a cardinal that they might literally be against it because it's fruity, but never have thought to address it. But even like Cardinal Ejic, who's next after Burke, he has a left-right symbol on promoting a synodal church. That makes me mistrust him. And he's X's besides that. But what does he have on the first 5?
So Burke?
No, Ejic.
Ejic, I'll find him right now. Ejic.
He's under
okay.
Burke.
First 5 I see are all X's. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There is a question mark under, see, this thing isn't following me as I move. So I think that was 1, 2, 3, 4. What is 5? Is 5 the Latin Mass? Because my computer's not tracking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so he's a question mark on the Vatican China secret, I believe. Let me see.
Okay. Yeah, he's got a question mark on focusing on climate change.
And then a question mark also on some of the other ones, but yeah.
Yeah, Cardinal Peter Erdo has some X's, but some question marks too. We don't have to get, I thought he was more out there as a conservative. Where is he on the first 5?
Let me look because it's not tracking.
Yeah, it's a little hard to,
let's see here. Sorry, let me just see if I can refresh. Maybe that'll help me.
I mean, Cardinal Erdo, for instance, has stressed that civilly remarried Catholics can only receive communion if they live in continence, meaning they abstain from sexual relations with their adulterous second union. That's all getting remarried is. You're just committing adultery, same as if you're running around on your wife. In line with the teaching of John Paul II. During the Synod on the Family, which he was Relator General, I remember that, Erdo issued a report stressing that any pastoral approach, you can have a pastoral approach, you can tell people nicely, no. You can't have sex with your concubine. Sorry, dude. You can do that in a nice way.
So I
must not compromise the truth of marriage's indissolubility.
He's question mark on ordaining female deacons. So it's unknown. And then we have an X for same-sex couples. So no on same-sex couples. Unknown on celibacy optional for priests. And then I have an ambiguous on restricting the Old Latin Mass.
Okay. So Erdo's a little less openly good compared to what I thought. Next, you have Cardinal Fernando Filoni. He looks like mostly not known. He's not tremendously important.
Yeah.
Cardinal Kurt Koch.
Yeah.
Nomen est omen.
Lots of ambiguous on that.
Lots of ambiguous there. A lot left-right symbol on 2 of these. Cardinal Gerhard Muller. Does he have 5 X's on the first half?
Well, he has 5 on the first 4. So we have a no on female deacons, no on same-sex couples, no on celibacy, making it optional. And then we have a no on restricting the Latin Mass. And then if I move over one more time, what is the last one? Sorry, it doesn't track. Vatican China stuff. That's no.
Okay, so Cardinal Mueller, maybe I should give a little more credit to. I've read some papers by this guy from his early days, and I remember some really questionable stuff from a late Benedict pontificate where he was CDF, but he's 10 X's. So far, he's only the second 10X cat in the
He
Cardinal.
said on Twitter, let me see if I can find this. I'll show this to everybody. He said that if we don't get an Orthodox Pope, there could be schism. So let me just...
Okay, Mueller, maybe I should give a little more credit to. He's definitely better than a moderate, somewhat. Cardinal Mark Willett is a big Francis man, Canadian Francis man. He's got 2 X's on the 5 I'm looking at. I'm not looking at the 5 Steph's looking at, but 2 X's is too many. And he was a big Francis backer.
Can't find that. I'll have to find it.
I'm sorry. He has 2 checks, which means just any checks, and you're not goonsies in my book. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who's being called a moderate.
Oh.
3 X's on my 5 issues, my latter 5.
I have X on no female deacons, ambiguous on both same-sex couples and priestly celibacy optional. And then we have a check mark for restricting the Latin Mass. It's so odd.
So he's Cardinal Secretary of State,
yeah.
And he's bad. That's 4 total checks. Mm-hmm. And remember, ambiguous more than likely means a check, not an X. So he's probably sitting at 5, 6, 7 checks. He's bad. I told you, he's not a moderate. We only have 2 10Xers. Cardinal Mauro Piacenza, he's like, no one knows who he is.
Never
it's like
heard
all
of this
question
guy.
marks.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I actually on mine I have no female deacons. We have question mark for same-sex couples, and we have no. He's a no on making a celibacy optional, and then I have a no on restricting the Latin Mass.
Okay, well, that's fine. He's all question marks here, and he's not really important anyway because he's not going to be Pope. So, Cardinal Pizzaballa said he's a definitive no on the German synodal way. That doesn't really mean much. He's a question mark on a lot of issues, and he's a maybe on focusing on climate change and promoting a synodal church. Where is he on the first 5? Because people he said some base things like he'd die for the church.
Yeah.
I don't know where he's at on doctrine. Where is he on those first 5 issues?
So, no on female deacons. Question mark on both celibacy optional and same-sex couples, and then no on restricting the Latin Mass.
Okay, is that 4 or 5?
That's 4, but I only because when I move it, it's and the question mark on the accord.
So he's no checks, but he's got some left-right symbols, which are bad, and question marks. You just need to, if you want to be Pope, you should stand up and declare yourself. I'm going to address this in a second. My closing thought's going to be on the idiocy of saying that this shouldn't be political. The demos is politics. Demos is politique, okay? Anything where you have 2 or more guys in the same room is politics. It's not some crass political process that's unnatural. That's a Straussian idea to say that politics is crass, coarse, below being religious. There's a great thing that came out in my conversation with Fuentes, where it was like, because you're Catholic, it doesn't mean that you're above it all. You're not. Just go on Catholic Twitter. Catholic feminists win. Well, this is why all these wives henpeck their husbands, because they pretend they're above the politics. That just means they lose. Everything's really about power here below. Doesn't mean that's the highest thing, but it is a category that's always with us. All the world is will to power and nothing besides. We need a good guy to take the pontificate. We won't need to know. And it's good that we, the people, because there have been all kinds of different ways of electing popes. We only got the conclave system like 800 years in. Did you know that? So it's great that we have this information. I'll address this as a closing thought. But Cardinal Albert Malcolm Ranjith, Pata Ben DJ Don. He's
interesting. Like what I'm seeing from my end on my 5, he's got X's for all the good stuff.
Okay.
Deacons, female deacons, same-sex couples, celibacy optional, and for restricting Latin Mass.
Yeah, we saw him the other day. He's what's it called? One of these hard to understand guys. He does have a check on focusing on climate change. That's lame. And he's got a left-right symbol for promoting a synodal church. I just think I think it would be a little much to. Where's he from? He's from.
I'll click on him right now. He's from Colombo, India. Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka. I just don't know if I could deal with 12 or 15 or even 5 years of these Sri Lankan homilies, that the homiletics with the Indian accent, like a Puna Hasapim Petalon. Coming from California, that was all I preached. It just, even if the guy's really based, which usually those guys aren't particularly based, they're kind of just clueless, kind of figuring out how to live in white culture. But even if they're really nice guys, I just can't deal with that accent. So I don't think he's going to be Pope, but he is considered one of the more papabile. He is rightward leaning. Okay.
Do we need
next
a
up,
Pope
we have
with like a California accent?
California. No.
Okay,
For the record, I just want to say something.
Here, let me get you full screen.
I live in the South with people that I think are really good people, but the Southern accent is dumb. It's dumb. It makes a genius sound dumb, even. But I have an accent that I'm extremely ashamed of, and I think is the only dumber accent than a Southern accent is a California accent.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. I don't like sounding like Johnny Utah. I don't like sounding like John Wick. I'm sorry that I do. I apologize particularly to my audio, to my Apple Podcast listeners, because all you have is the voice. And it does. I'm like, wow, man, this IQ is going to waste with this voice.
It's funny, like our neighbors, this is totally an aside, but when we talk about the highways here, we're always adding the in front of everything, like the 58 and the. They're like, what is the matter with you? And Californians, we refer to all of our highways
with the definite article. Yeah, you say, hop on the 99, roll over to the 5, take the 5 to the 405, or 5 to the 91, Lower East Side, but everyone else is like, hop on 91 or 5 or here 98. We call it the 98. I don't think that's why we sound dumb. I think we sound dumb just because of our inflection, or I do. I'm speaking for myself. I don't think you have it.
The Pope from California.
Okay, we have our next 10Xer, right? Cardinal Sarah's a 10Xer. He's first 5, right?
Yes, he is. There he is.
See, these guys.
Oh no, there's a question mark on I believe on the
what?
The Vatican China secret, I think.
Okay. I'm going to call Cardinal Sarah an honorary 10Xer. He was the prefect for the Congregation of Divine Worship before he was demoted by angry, bitter Francis. And he was never involved in worldly stuff like the Vatican China deal, super corrupt, with the Communist Party allowing to make bishops. That's basically what the deal was. He's completely against that, I guarantee it. That's the one issue that I would allow a question mark on, because he simply wasn't a diplomat. He's the head liturgy worship guy in the church, or he was.
How old is he? He's
older than I like. He's just fit and thin.
He's 79.
See, I don't like that. I don't like that. But other than that, Cardinal Sarah's good. He's an honorary 10Xer, meaning we have 3. We have Burke, Sarah, and to my surprise, I thought we would have 1 or 2 question marks under Cardinal Mueller. But
the rest of these guys just look like trouble.
Wait till we get to Cardinal Daniel Fernando Sturla. I mean, he's
that's what we're on to now. Okay.
Wait, so he's got 4 X's on the right here. Where was he have on
the site is kind of bugging out on me. Surla?
Be stewards of the environment after Laudato Si. So I would count that. Sturla. What is he on the first 5?
Okay, so we have a question mark for deacons. We have a no on same-sex couples. We have a question mark on celibacy, and we also have a question mark on Old Latin, right? Restricting it. So
he's not going to be Pope
news.
Anyway.
Bad news.
So who cares? But he's not good. He's not going to be we only have 3 10Xers of the Papabili. Now we come to Cardinal Luis Antonio Gokim Tagle. And this guy could be, it wouldn't surprise me if this cat were 10 checks. If he were a 10 checker, the opposite of a good one. He's 3 checks on the last 5 issues.
We have an X on female deacons, and then we have ambiguous for everything else. So okay. Latin Mass, celibacy for priests, same-sex couples. So
yeah, I count the ambiguous as a check.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's fair.
Question mark is question mark, but no. Sarah was not an ambiguous. He was a question mark. That just means he hasn't talked on it, and I know he would be against the Vatican thing. Okay, so Tagle's really bad. He's Asian Francis. Next, Cardinal Jose Tolentino de Melonza.
Mendonca.
Oh, Mendonça. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. I don't know where I got that. He's a couple of checks on the last 5 issues. I'm sure he's a couple checks on the first 5. Is that right?
We have ambiguous for deacons. We have question mark for same-sex couples. We have ambiguous for celibacy optional, and we also have a question mark for Old Latin Mass. Yeah.
So those are he's several checks. There should be 10. And then Cardinal Matteo Maria Zuppi, the Cardinal Archbishop of Bologna, important historical position. He's almost a 10 checker. He is so far. He's probably the most liberal cardinal here. How many checks does he have in the first 5?
I have no on female deacons. I have check mark yes on same-sex couples, blessing them. And then we have a yes for making priestly celibacy optional, and a ambiguous on restricting the Latin Mass.
So he's like an 8 checker if you fudge ambiguous to
this guy here.
Check that. Yeah. So Cardinal Matteo Maria Zuppi, he would be worst case scenario. I guess he is even worse than Tagle.
Yeah, he's younger, I think, too, isn't he? 69.
Yeah.
How old is Tagle? Let's look. He is.
Do we not have Turkson?
67. No, Tagle is 67, so that's going to go in his favor, I think. Oof, boy.
Yeah. So Turkson is not considered papabile.
He's just too old. See Turkson.
He was very papabile 5-8 years ago.
No, don't see him. But everybody's been talking about Pizza Balla. What do you think about him?
Yeah, that's just sort of new Catholics that don't really know. He's said some cool things on social media, like he'd die for Christ. But I addressed this earlier. He's just not a known enough quantity. What we should be hoping for is any of the 10 Xers. I'm surprised to find Cardinal Mueller there, but I think the best one. I would like a younger guy. I'd like a younger guy.
Balla is 60.
He's 60.
He's pretty young.
He's new, and that explains some of his lack of, the equivalent of congressional voting record. But I don't know. He's not a known enough quantity. How old is Burke? Burke has no chance. He's the primary opponent of Francis.
So sad. Again, this is, if you guys are wondering about this site, this is collegeofcardinalsreport.com, collegeofcardinalsreport, all one word.com. And Sophia Press helped put this on. So let's look at Burke. All right. So he is 76.
Yeah, there's just him and Cardinal Sarah, the 2 best cardinals in the college, are 76 and 79 respectively. It's really sad. And there just aren't that many other good guys. So what does that tell you, that out of 135 total cardinals, there are like 2 really solid ones? Mueller has disappointed me before, but I guess he's a 10Xer. So if I'm going to be really, really generous and call Mueller, forget all the stuff that was bad about Mueller, we have 3 good ones in 120. That tells you it's a black pill. That tells you all this white pill stuff is fake white pill stuff. So just trying to keep you reasonable. If we go into the conclave, I'll be doing lots of shows, and get a good result, you will see me celebrating. I don't know what that looks like, but you'll see it. But I'm not expecting it the same way all these young guys are who don't understand that church politics work. Now, here's the thing. It's called Romanita for a reason. It means when you go to Rome, you are more political than American politics, than inside the Beltway DC politics. Romanita is Romanita because of Roman Catholic. And it's been that way for a long time. Even when the church worked, Romanita is the term that means we have to be wise as serpents, yet gentle as doves. So the idiocy of stupid Karen, normie, nitwits who say, well, I don't like sites like this because you're politicizing something sacred. No, these men are not sacred any more than you and I are sacred. We're sacred to God. We have dignity. We're made in his image and likeness. But it ends there. This is politics. Personnel is policy. Personnel is politics. Who is the next pope is absolutely crucial. I'm not trying to go a full show without addressing the main thing I was saying last show, which is that we need a conclave before the conclave to determine whether or not Francis's pontificate was legitimate at all. I still hold that, but we knew we weren't probably going to get it.
What would be your main contender for why it wouldn't be?
what I said last time. Go and read the published first edition of the papal biographer, Austin Ivere's book, The Great Reformer. Came out right early in the Francis pontificate, and they had to pull it off the shelves the first weekend because it admitted that Francis did something, in his own words, that would be a late sententiae excommunication with specific regards to taking power, agreeing to being canvassed for, which would have invalidated and excommunicated all the St. Gallen Mafia, who we know canvassed for him. They've all admitted that. And it would invalidate him himself. But the cardinals don't seem to be doing that, and feather me unsurprised. Also, if we get a bad pope in a week or two, feather me unsurprised. I've been doing this for a while now, not as long as some, not as long as Lepanto but you know, been doing this for 7 years now, watching the cardinalate, watching the pope, watching the Vatican, watching the consistories, watching the dicasteries, watching the papal institutes and the changes being made there, and who's got power to do what and when, who knew what and when, who moved this molester cardinal around, who brought him back. I've been doing it for 7 years, and it's not particularly difficult tea leaves to read. Sorry.
Somebody in
I'm
chat,
skeptical.
Skunky X, said I got that first edition for only $8 on Alibris.
No way. Can you tell me what page, Skunky X, you have the key line on? Is it page 4? I think it's right up front.
Skunky X, please email us that screenshot. If you have
DM me
it.
the
Timothy
screenshot.
J. Gordon
Because
at timothyjgordon.com.
I've asked my friend Patrick Coffin to do it before, and I think he did, and I think I lost it because I got bored.
Because of California.
Can you DM me if you're on Twitter?
I think that you have to follow people, that you have to follow people for them to DM you.
Send
so Timothy
me a follow
J. Gordon.
request. I will follow you. DM me, and then I'll follow you. Then you DM me the pic of that screenshot. So I didn't know you could get it still. Okay, I need to go get myself one. I don't have one. Pat has one. I just want to close with this notion. It is truly, fully, plenarily, literally stupid, idiotic to say this is the church. It's not political. The church, the Eucharist is not political. It is a divine institution. Christ divinely instituted it at the Last Supper. It's a sacrament. It's him himself when substantiated. But the church is not just a divine institution. It is a divine institution and a human institution. It's what Aristotle calls a composite. And the human part of it is the most political institution in the world. It's more political than Congress. So don't say that sites like Cardinalum Collegii Recensio is bad because it politicizes, it profanes something sacred. No, this is politics to the teeth. Romanita, understanding who these cardinals are, what they've done over the last 2 to 3 generations since the council, and what they're planning to do. That's all going to come out in the wash. That's the main point of the show today. They can no longer be called clueless after Francis. They shouldn't have been clueless in the 70s or 80s, but they can no longer cleave to their plausible deniability after the Francis pontificate, the mass dropped. And now we're going to get an answer. If they are still complicit, then they are just subversive stumbling blocks who are not Christian. So if they give us, Cardinal Zuppi or Cardinal Tagle or any of the bad German Synodal Way Lavender Mafia types, we will know them by their fruits. And they can't claim deniability on the grounds of, plausible elements like lack of knowledge or something anymore. But the church is political. The human aspect of it is. Not the divine aspect. The divine aspect of it is the sacraments and the institution, the creation, the generation of the offices of Pope by Peter, by Christ, of Bishop by Christ at the Last Supper, of cardinals by the Pope with a kind of infallible disciplinary act, of priests, the presbyterate by Christ, of the deacons by the bishops. That's unblemished. But staffing those created offices is utterly human. It's left fully to these guys you're staring at before you, these papabile men who are popeable, and the ones who vote for them, the cardinals who are under 80 years old. And it is pure politics. It is pure Romanita. The term is Romanita because of Roman politics, specifically in conclaves, which this conclave is coming up fast. The funeral of Pope Francis is Saturday, 2 mere days away. And they seem to have skipped any kind of special conclave where he would be declared anti-pope, and that is not wise. They should have gotten together and done a special conclave. I still urge them to do it. Even if they say no, we assess the evidence and we say no, that would be something. But to just ignore all the evidence that he might have been anti-pope and to just skip over it, whistle past the graveyard, and to go on to business as usual, let's go to the conclave, is a mistake. But I already said as much. I also told you in my show on Monday that I didn't expect them to do the right thing. I have become black-pilled in many ways.
A few things. Here's just a live view of St. Peter's right now. People filtering in to see the Pope lay in state. And then Cardinal Mueller, who we talked about earlier, Father V on Twitter said that there will be a schism in the church if, this is what Cardinal Mueller said, that there will be a schism in the church if an Orthodox Pope is not elected. And here he is again. But
okay,
this live view of the Vatican right now.
So what makes Cardinal Mueller, thank you for reminding me of that. There will be a schism in the church if they don't give us an Orthodox Pope. What makes Cardinal Mueller bump up from a sort of center-right guy to a ballsier right-wing Catholic, a 10Xer, one of only 3 10X voting bloc guys with Sarah and Burke, is his opposition of Francis and his stark opposition, using even more clear language than even Cardinal Burke, to express that Francis gave us actual material heresy, maybe formal heresy, with Amoris Laetitia, the April 2016 document, which says you can give communion to unrepentant mortal sinners. That doesn't work. And ever since then, he has repeated it. And so what I think he might mean when he says there will be a schism in the church if we don't get an Orthodox Pope addresses the concern I just expressed 2 minutes ago. We might need, and again, there's a logistical personnel problem because who voted, who was real. He might be taking a shortcut to the post hoc depoping of Francis, which is a real possibility. He knows that if the College of Cardinals doesn't have the cojones to anti-Pope Francis, if they still gave us a truly stalwart, faithful son of the church like Burke or Sarah, or I guess himself, then that Pope would be charged under God himself with declaring an anti-Pope, which, you know, as you guys have known, I think the evidence is more suggestive that Francis was an anti-Pope than not. That doesn't mean he will be, because if he's allowed to continue on in the annals of history as not an anti-Pope, then an anti-Pope he was not. There's this contingent aspect of ecclesiology, which also arises out of the composite nature of the church, meaning mixed between human and divine. It's a weird contingency. There's enough evidence, I guarantee you, to show he's anti-Pope. That doesn't mean he's an anti-Pope, though, and this is what Patrick Coffin and Edmund Mosley never deal with. If he's never declared one, then I guess he gets through, and we have to acknowledge till the end of time, till the general judgment, that there was a 266th Pope. So it's another reason to say, you're an idiot if you say this isn't political. Well, ask Cardinal Mueller, who is the cardinal doctrinal chief, the CDF under 2 popes. He is the doctrinal chief under Benedict and under the first 3 years of Francis, 4 years of Francis. I'm surprised Francis left Mueller in place there for so long, but he knows what he's talking about. This is political. I respectfully submit to you. Schism if we don't get an Orthodox Pope. We should retweet that. maybe with a comment. What else? You said a couple things, Steph. Is there something else?
We just have on screen right now the live view of St. Peter's, where we have the Pope laying in state. Interestingly, they released some, I don't know if it was somebody, just a random person on Twitter, or if it was some Vatican news site, but they said that some people were getting into trouble. Some social media influencers were going and taking a picture of themselves, like smiling and making faces with the Pope in the background, deceased. So people in bad taste are
do we know who did
abound. I didn't recognize any of the faces that they were showing. It was kind of like a montage of people who were
idiots
doing that. And it's interesting because I don't know if any of you have been to St. Peter's before, but they are very protective, not only in situations like this. And if you watch the live feed that's going on right now, you'll see some of the security people even like loitering. Even some old ladies who are taking a little bit longer to kind of walk past, they're really shooing them along, and you're not allowed to take photos. But they're very much like that in the Sistine Chapel, where the conclave will actually take place. When you go in there, they're not nice when you go to see the Sistine Chapel. The guards in there, if you are taking pictures, or if you're loitering around too long, they will yell at you and they will tell you to move along. Yeah. Same thing with St. Peter's actual tomb. If you go there, you are not allowed to just stand there in front of it. You need to move along and keep going and keep the traffic moving, even if there's no traffic, by the way, because Tim and I would go there often when we lived in Rome, and we'd be the only ones down there. And still they were like, yeah, move along. You saw it, move along. So they're doing that right now, even on this live feed with the Pope's remains. They're not letting people just stand there. They're really pushing them along.
Wow. All right. Well, let's call it there. Let's pray. Remember to pray every day for the new Pope, for an Orthodox faithful son of the church. Continue to pray for Francis's soul. There's plenty of public stuff to be prayed for and atoned for. And Francis did not make it right publicly before he died. So that's going to fall to the next Pope, which is why we need an extra Orthodox guy. And we always need Orthodox popes. This is like saying, is the Pope Catholic? But we need an extra Orthodox Pope this time, because he's going to have to undo a lot of muck. There's a lot of swamp to drain on the Tiber.
So the next, just so people know, that the Pope's funeral will be, the service will be live, I'm sure, on lots of things. We probably should, maybe you should go live and we'll just kind of cover it as it's going on. But Fox...
Isn't it like 5 a.m. for us?
It's 3 to 7 a.m. Eastern time, I think. Let me look and see. We're up late anyway, but let's see.
That would be pre-bed rather than post-bed for us.
Let me look and see when this is. When is the Pope? Okay, so yeah, it'll be April 26th. The Holy See press office announced on Tuesday Pope Francis's funeral mass will take place on Saturday the 26th at 10 a.m. in St. Peter's Square. I'm guessing 10 a.m. is local Rome time, so we'll have to do the math on that.
Okie doke. God bless you all. Pray for a holy 267th Pope. Deus Volt, friends.